Awesome. And we have on today legendary track coach, or legendary coach in general, not just track. You coach coaches, you coach everyone. Dan Pfaff, coach, thank you so much for coming on. I always appreciate you and your time. We were just talking about some of the concussion stuff you're doing or that you've done in the past. Questions. You said we were talking about the ocular training and revolve and how it involves the concussion protocols. What do you do for something like that?
Well, I think there's quite a bit of research out there that, various eye assessment, tracking, and movement uh, protocols kind of lead us to know where they're at in the recovery or acuteness of the concussion. I mean, the first thing a doctor usually does is, light in the eye, look at the pupil and all of that. I mean, that's decades old, but we've gotten a little bit further on various eye tracking tests and exercises and assessments. So I think, as I travel around the world with rugby and football in Europe and AFL and hockey and whatnot, we're seeing more and more high performance groups, using various levels of eye assessment during the return to play protocol of concussions.
Now, you're utilizing it as an assessment. Are you utilizing it to help improve the concussions?
Uh, I think the jury's still out on that. Is it chicken before the egg, egg before the chicken? Is the protocol for assessment, influencing the recovery, or is the recovery influencing the assessment? I I'm not smart enough to figure that one out yet.
Yeah. Have you seen any of the work? And it's funny, Cal Dietz. I just hung out with him a few months back, and he was talking about certain blocks. He was doing muscle testing with certain blocks while guys were looking in specific directions and like post concussive protocols. So, have you seen anything along those lines with physical blocks associated with eyes in different ranges of motion or different looking in specific areas?
Yeah, so in the past, I've done quite a bit of work with skiers. And, skiers have all kinds of lenses depending on light and then the reflection of light and the event they're doing, the velocities are going and all of that. So a lot of this vision training and research and assessment really started in the world of skiing.
Huh.
And, if you're going down a hill at 105 miles an hour and it's dim light and it's snowing and you don't have the right lens on and you don't see the gate in time, it's a disaster. So probably my first foray into this realm of training the eyes, was in skiing. And then being a jumps coach, pole vaulters had better be able to see the box in order to plant the pole, and long jumpers and triple jumpers need to see the takeoff board. And did a lot of research with James Hay and his group at Iowa on the biomechanics of approach dynamics and steering and targeting. So probably my first two big drivers into this world were, working with skiers and rehab, and then, working in track and field with jumpers. So it's always been an interest, and it's always been a deep dive research wise. And like I said, now with, these goggles and, artificial intelligence and machine learning, it's it's way ahead of where I'm at intellectually.
Yeah. Yeah, that stuff is well beyond me. I mean, even from a business standpoint, the use of AI, something as simple as creating different copy for different posts, it saves so much time. My brother works for London Stock Exchange, and he's been able to save thousands of hours just by using something as simple as ChatGPT with reframing certain stuff. It's wild.
Yeah, it's a little bit scary because it's, I go back to the early days of computer coding like COBOL and stuff like that. Garbage in is garbage out. So, I work with a group in Sydney View Motion that's, uses machine learning and AI to analyze running, curvilinear and linear and change in direction and whatnot. And I mean, we're doing 10,000 trials on very diverse populations just to get an algorithm for what's happening to the foot from the time it touches the ground till the time it leaves the ground. So sadly, I think there's a lot of cowboys out there that are, jumping in the AI machine learning world, and they're putting a lot of garbage together and
Yeah.
claiming they have really valid, reliable algorithms. And if you dig a little bit deeper, all of a sudden you see this garbage in, garbage out phenomena.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. A lot of my high school kids, they get busted for plagiarism all the time when plugging in because do you know who Naval Ravikant is?
No, I don't.
So he's a tech multimillionaire, angel investor. He started AngelList.com, I think, early investor in Uber and some other stuff. I love listening to his stuff. I think he's like our modern day philosopher. He just sits and he thinks and thinks and thinks. And he's super sharp, and he doesn't think the AI thing is all that great. And one of the reasons why, I mean, it's phenomenal, but he's like the whole thinking and like putting things together and like it's good at digging up information and giving us what we already know. But as far as like critically problem solving sort of thing, like it's not there. And he says one of the best ways to prove that is ask it to write you a poem. It sucks. And he's a big poet. Like he loves poetry, loves just the art aspect of language. And he said, no, it's not there, and he doesn't see it being there all that much. So like we're always going to need AI is going to shortcut some things, but as far as doing the thinking for us, I'm with you. Garbage in, garbage out.
Well, I mean, coaching is heavily reliable on the human factor, relationships and emotions and things like that. And, I don't see AI scaling, those endeavors in the very near future.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and even the I don't know if it's intangibles or but the things you see as a coach. And I know I'm watching a guy run, and I just say cut it just because of what I feel, what I see, what I've seen in the past and how it's going here. Why? So we're good. Like I had an NFL guy, one of my linebackers. He was in 2 weeks ago, last week, and the way he was warming up, the way he was moving, it didn't look good to me. It just didn't look sharp. And then he says, "Yeah, you know what? My quad's a little tight. We were supposed to do a leg day that day." I said, "We're doing upper today." He says, "Wait, what? Why? Why?" I said, "Because it's enough." "Oh, no, no, no. We could stretch it out. We could work on it." "Yeah, but tomorrow's Friday, and you're not doing anything on the weekend. We could push it off to tomorrow. It's okay." Like, it's certain things that what we feel, what we see based on our previous experiences is like, well, is it worth this? Is it worth that? And I don't know that certain computering, certain AI is capable of doing something like that, or if it will ever be able to do something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think a lot of coaching is determining the bandwidth allowance of a movement. Like if you're a young guy and you're really resilient and you can throw anything at them, their bandwidth allowance on movement variables is huge. If you're
Mm-hmm.
a 32-year-old linebacker hanging on in the league, your bandwidth allowance on a lot of movements is pretty damn narrow. So, yeah, I can see AI machine learning, determining bandwidths and whatnot, but there's so many variables in movement. I think that's going to be a big build out.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And also to base it off of what, you know what I mean? Like, a great example, I had a guy who played 13 or 14 years in the NFL. And by year 10, it took him longer and longer and longer to really warm up. Like I could tell, like, oh, and by longer and longer to warm up, I mean to get him in shape to be able to go to camp. And we'd be 50 sessions in before he started looking like, oh, he doesn't look like an old man anymore. You know what I mean? Like to like dust off the cobwebs with stuff like that. It's and to be able to identify at what point what the main issue is. And a guy I have recently, young guy or younger guy, just had a couple of kids, and he's a good dad. So what does that mean? He's not recovering. He's not sleeping. Like he's doing all the things he's supposed to do. And I can see it in how he's moving. But because it's not the same as last year, which wasn't the same as the year before, but like the year before he was perfect, and last year he was just like a little bit, and this year it was like a lot. And what am I seeing when he's running? I, I deduced it down to it seemed like it was his soleus this time, but why? You know what I mean? What was and how are we going to get this information to plug it into AI? Because even I don't know if it was the soleus, and now it's just trial and error, trial and error, trial and error for a certain amount of time. Like it's so tough for me to really buy that any of us are going to be replaced by any kind of AI.
I kind of reflect back on this rage of load management, that's everybody's talking about that. We can measure physical outputs, and try to manage those, but trying to wrangle emotional
Yeah.
inputs and stressors and cognitive inputs and stressors. I'll give you an example. I have an all-pro cornerback that was traded to a team, and the hours and hours of meetings and video review, and he came from a program that was pretty loose. And after the second OTA, he said, Dan, I'm worn out. I don't know what's going on. Do I have mono or, like nothing's changed. The wife and kids are staying with grandma. I'm on my own. I'm trying to get sleep, but like I'm freaking dead. And I was like, dude, you went from, maybe 2 hours of classroom and tape to like 6, 7 hours. That's huge cognitive load, and nobody's monitoring that.
How now? Let me ask you this: how would you quantify cognitive loading? Right? Like, would you do a before and after assessment? Like, how do you feel here? How do you feel there? And it just a basic survey. What would you, or would you do a test?
Well, my first stop is hours at the coalface. What's your normal cognitive load? You know, from family to driving to media to social media to sponsors to, you know, what's a normal week look like for you? And now have we had a very abnormal week, and
Mhm.
why, and what's increased and all of that? So just looking at the nuts and bolts of, interface, over a period of time would be a first layer. Second, if I thought it was a big driver for, diminishing output and health, then I would, probably encourage this guy to, you know, take notes or keep a diary or whatever. Like when he's in these stressful encounters, kind of rank them, like, wow, that was really stressful. 5, you know, I was half asleep, so that was stress 1 or whatever. So, like I've had in track and field, a lot of our athletes they're hand to mouth, so they're doing sponsors and tours and speaking and whatnot, and like 2 hour commute in London, a 2 hour shake hands and greet and meet, and then a 2 hour commute back. That's 6 hours of huge stress, and that was on this guy's rest day. That wasn't a rest day.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and even something as small as like photo shoots. It seems innocuous, right? But like it's still there. I had a guy who we had a high intensity sprint day planned, and he had 4 hours of photo shoots. And we talk about it, and originally he's like, "Dude, I'm just standing around. No big deal. We'll be able to sprint." I was like, "Okay, cool." And in the back of my head, I know like it likely isn't happening. He leaves a photo shoot. He goes, "Dude, I'm shot." Like
Well,
it's
I mean, how many NFL guys stand around for 4 hours?
yeah.
Like, I don't know what your guys are, but they want to park right by the door. They walk in, they sit down, they go. if they're on the field, they're looking for the golf cart to sit down or a tackling dummy to sit. They're not standing for 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
that's a good call.
when I was a coach, it always amazed me when the new school year would start. And, in the summer, I'm in Europe, I'm traveling, I'm doing meets and flying around and all of that. And then, bam, I'm back and I'm on the track. And some of the jobs I had, it was long days, like maybe 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. on the track. And I was like, after the first week, I thought I was, on a death march because I'm just not used to standing for 12, 14 hours a day.
Hmm.
When I was a student teacher, like I was a farm kid, my dad ran a construction company, so I was in good shape. I was country strong, work strong, and student taught 6, 7 hours of standing in front of a classroom. By the end of the week, I was totally trashed because I'd never stood, 6, 7 hours a day, super focused, interfacing with people, for 6 hours straight. Like that was a unique stressor.
Hmm.
So that's why I think sometimes on these guys that are shit at time management, you got to kind of do logs and, kind of like you do hydration diaries or food diaries for a few days to see like, what's really going on and how do you rank what's going on.
So, do you have anyone under your supervision, like specifically you, only you, everyone else is there to assist?
I'd say the only athlete that's even close is my Paralympic guy right now. He's in Athens, Georgia, so coach remotely, get together for a week every month for a training camp. And we build a team around him, and I'm the gatekeeper and the traffic cop for the team around him. But that would probably be the closest example where I'm kind of the HP traffic cop, if you will.
And what do you monitor with him?
Well, he's married with two kids. He's very active in the Paralympic communities, built a foundation, and they're building a training center in Atlanta for para athlete and para sport. So he's spread pretty thin. He's 32. He's been to like 5 or 6 Paralympic games, 8 or 9 world champs. He's a medalist many times. So with para, there's always asymmetry in movement. So trying to keep these guys in one piece is a real battle. You think you got some asymmetries going on. Try coaching a para guy with a blade.
Yeah.
In the last 2 years, he's been a long jumper, which is gas on the fire for asymmetry. So a lot of our work is the first layer of work is how do we keep this guy healthy? And how do we write programming that works around all the stuff he's got to do as a husband, as a dad, as a foundation director, building a training center. And he's a Toyota world sponsor. So he's all over the world with Toyota doing gigs and all of that. So he's a consummate 3 day rollover guy. Like he might get 3 training days in a week. He might get three training days in 10 days or whatever. It just depends because recovery and health are the big drivers for him.
Hmm.
Then depends on where we're at and what's going on and his feedback. So like right now he's really doubling down on sleep hygiene and sleep because he keeps a log and you could just see a descending trend and he got really bad this past autumn with all of his duties and he went from an average of 8.5 hours of sleep down to 5.
Now, why did the stress? Why did the sleep go? Because of stress, or because he wasn't feeling well, or that he was overtrained? What was, or like his kids were waking him up?
Just too many irons in the fire. Just bad planning, bad time management.
Mm.
And then one child's 5 years old, the other's 3, and so they're bringing home every virus in the world. So he's catching it, every bug that's come down the pipe.
Yeah. So, so guys, and you don't train him physically. You train. He's a distance client of yours now.
Well, we get together, like I said, probably about 1 week every month. I either go to Athens or he comes to Austin. And then
Really?
we do Zoom practices. So every day he's sending video and we're either doing it live or I review it right after the session. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
we'll Zoom practice certain lifts in the weight room. We'll Zoom practice certain plyometric menu items. So I don't Zoom practice the entire day. It's just we kind of pick, where we need to analyze and assess things. So like today, he had power conversion work after his block start workout. So we videoed his overhead back throws and between the leg forward throws and rotational throws. And he recorded, how far he was throwing. And, we looked at the distances, the quality of movement and all of that. And so I was pretty pleased with the numbers and the quality of movement. So we probably won't review that again in a Zoom practice for another couple weeks.
What are you looking for with those throws?
It's a lot like what you would look for in the weight room on a lift. You know, joint synchronization, postures, body segment positions, angular velocities of various joints. So a multiple throw to me is a really nice bridge between the weight room and the playing field. It's teaching you to take the strength you're gaining and converting it into usable power and expression of power.
So, and you're looking for them to be, and how do you like the postures? How are you assessing what is a good posture versus what is a bad posture, right? Because if you go structuralism, neutral spine. If you go powerlifting, kyphotic spine. You know what I mean? Like if you go elite sprinting, lordotic
Well,
spine. You know,
I'm not, I'm probably going to upset some people. I'm not a tribalist on this. Postures are unique to task.
Mhm.
And, there may be milliseconds where the spine is neutral, and there's a lot of seconds where it isn't. So it's where in the movement are you? Is the torso commensurate with the thigh angle, which is commensurate to the shank angle? Is the ankle joint, knee joint, and hip joint congruent in their movement, in their positioning, at the bottom of the movement, at the top of the movement, at mid movement? So I think probably the greatest parallel would be, what do you monitor on an Olympic lift? From a side view, from a frontal view, from a rear view. What are you watching? What are your key landmark positions? And then what are the movement pathways between those positions?
Mhm.
And then over time, I build files like really good movers, very average movers, very poor movers, or novice movers. So, I know what spectrum, where are they at today or in their stage of development? Are they really elite with these movements? Or are they really poor at those movements? Or are they a work in progress in those movements?
So now for me, obviously everyone's different. Everyone looks different. Everyone moves different. And if it don't look right, it don't fly right. Like we can understand that. We can personally quantify that in our head and understand it. But if someone were to ask you to explain it, like a between the knees med ball throw, and you say that looks like garbage, that doesn't, even though that was a PR throw and that wasn't, right? So how would you break something like that down to justify your explanation? Because I've had guys with awful swings and hit the ball the furthest that they've ever hit it. You know what I mean? And how do I say that that was an awful swing because it was the best result that they've gotten?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a little tug of war between effective and efficient. So you can be effective but not inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that shelf life of effective? How long before it blows up or you get injured or you develop chronicity from that movement And can you replicate that movement? So, you might get a one-off value that's incredible, that was terribly done. But that's an outlier measure. What is your mean? I'm always like, where are we at? I look at our mean value. That's where the athlete's really at. So if I got a guy that's running 100 and he's had 10 races at 10:20, but he caught a race somewhere with a great tailwind and a monster track and he ran 998, he's not a 990 sprinter. So on these positions and movements, it's kind of like counter jump analysis. Like I can go deeper and slower and get a great counter movement. But in my sport, am I ever going to be that deep moving that slow? No. So, ergonomically, you got to say, okay, what angles does this person use most of the time in their sport? Those are the angles we got to assess. So, like our between the leg forward throw, kids could go really deep and have the ball way behind themselves, have a long force application and get a nice result. All right, what does that tell me? Well, in a deep position with a long pathway, they're really good. But if I put some constraints on them and I'm say, okay, you can only go half squat and the ball can only go to between your legs, it can't go behind you. What is your result? So it's just like on Olympic lifts, I have guys come from the floor, from a 6-inch block, from a 12-inch block, hang, high hang. We explore a lot of zones. And we're going to spend more time in the zones that's closer to the zones that they're going to use in their sporting discipline. Is there direct transference? No, but it's closing the gap in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think a problem we got right now is coaches are not doing ergonomic analysis of sporting tasks, whether it's a menu item or what they're doing in the sport. And that's coloring their assessment and their testing protocol and their interpretation of the data on these protocols.
So I like your explanation of that, and the thought of performing a med ball specific to the movement qualities that you're attempting to enhance versus performing a med ball throw to get the furthest throw possible. Um, and it's little things like that that go. I think that really make what you do, or any coach, more specialized in the training to enhance specific qualities. Um,
Well, for example, with our multiple throws, so we have overhead back between the leg forward, we have rotational over one shoulder, rotation of the other. We have plyo multiple throw combos like one hop forward, overhead back. We have a variety of things that we're doing. And we also vary the weight. So we might use a lot heavier implement in early training and then a medium weighted implement in the middle of training. And then in competition phase, we might be using a lighter implement.
Mhm.
So, I know there's a lot of debate on force velocity curves or whatnot. I'm just a step back, big picture. Like, I like to assess people where they're at on all of these variables. So, we have data for athletes that throw the 16-pound shot, 7.26. We have data on 6 kilo shots, 5 kilo shots, 4 kilo shots, and 3 kilo shots. And generally, our best movers that are healthy, they do a nice job no matter what the weight.
Mm.
Younger kids will do better with the lighter weight than the heavier weight. Your real muscular driven guys are going to do really well with the heavy weight, where your greyhound guys are going to do better with the lighter weight.
Yeah.
So again, it's that ergonomic analysis of what are we trying to do? and then using the right stimulus to try to obtain that.